For this video, we are going to be delving deeper into the world of externalities, more about what they are and how to graph all of the different types that you have to graph, as well as a few other small things related to them. So first, when we're discussing externalities, what we really have to think about is the private, which is in-market behavior, versus the social behavior, and how to look at the differences between the two. Private, as I said, is just in the market, but social is inside and outside of the market. So you can look at this as social benefits versus private benefits. So how am I benefiting from production or consumption versus how is everybody else benefiting as well as myself? And it's the same thing for costs. You can have inside and outside costs. So what is production and consumption costing me versus the cost for me and society in whole? Now, when there is external cost to those third parties that aren't necessarily the people in the market, that's what an externality is. So our first type of externality that we're looking at is consumption. This is when you are consuming something and it causes either positive or negative externalities on other people. So either it benefits people more from you consuming it, or it causes their benefit to decrease. So an externality means two demand curves. If it's an externality in consumption, two demand curves, one private and one social. And the thing to remember is your social benefit, which is going to be your social demand curve, if you will equal your private benefit, which is your demand curve normally, plus your external benefit, which is the third party benefit. So how do we graph this? When you look at it this way, here is a positive consumption externality. So this causes the positive benefit to third parties. So here you have your social benefit curve being higher, being greater than your private benefit curve. Your market outcome is going to be the intersection of your private benefit, which is that curve that I'm outlining there, and your private cost, which is right there. So if you think of it, this is supply, private supply, and this is private benefit, which is demand. The intersection of those two gets you your quantity and your price for the market. Now, if you notice, this is too low. There is deadweight loss, as signified by the area between the quantity that you are consuming, the supply curve, and the social demand curve. That area of that triangle, that is the deadweight loss. So how do we correct for this? We try to shift our private demand to be in line with our social demand, our private benefit in line with our social benefit. We use this as a per unit subsidy. Sometimes you'll see it referred to as a Péjovian subsidy after the guy who came up with it. It's the idea of shifting that MPB to the right by using a per unit subsidy. Remember, a subsidy is money that you get from the government that encourages your activity. Now, we also have negative consumption externalities. Negative consumption externalities is when your consumption of something causes negative benefits on third parties. So when you cause negative benefits on third parties, now our social benefit is less than our private benefit. So here is our private benefit line. That is our private demand. And here is our social benefit line. That is right there. Now, usually you will see this as MPB and MSB and MPC and MSC. These graphs I know don't have them, but they're the best graphs I could find now. Just flip-flop those in your head. So if those are our two benefit curves, our supply curve, which is our cost curve, is the same. That's our marginal social cost and our marginal private cost. The intersection of our private cost and benefit is going to be our market outcome. So this will produce at P1 and Q1. The deadweight loss still exists. It is the triangle created by our quantity, the social demand curve, and the supply curve. So the area of that triangle that I'm filling in right now, that is the deadweight loss. Now, once again, we want to correct for this. We want to bring private benefit in line with the social benefit. So now we have to decrease that marginal private benefit. We have to shift it left. And in order to do that, we need to institute a per unit tax, shifting it to the left. It does have to be per unit. I do want to stress that throughout all of these. It's a per unit tax, not a lump sum. When it's lump sum, it doesn't change consumption or production. It doesn't change it. So here we have a per unit tax, shifting MPB left and taking us down to the Q2 level, which is what society wants us to be at. Much like with our positive consumption, we moved from Q1 to Q2 because society wanted us to have a quantity of Q2. Production externalities. This is when the producing of the good, not the consuming of a good, causes those positive or negative externalities. And once again, you have to think of your social cost being equal to your private cost plus your external cost. That's what MEC stands for, marginal external cost. So the marginal external cost would be the cost to third parties. This is represented on two supply curves. So instead of two demand, we have two supply, both represented by cost. So there's marginal social cost and marginal private cost. So we're going to start with positive production externalities. Here, the production causes less cost to society than it does privately. So this is something that we'd want to encourage. Now here we have an MSB curve that would also be equal to your MPB, marginal private benefit. Those are one and the same when you have a production externality. Now what's split apart now is our marginal private cost curve, marginal private cost, our marginal social cost. The intersection of our marginal private cost and our marginal private benefit is going to be how much we produce. We produce a Q1 at a price of P1, but society would like us to actually produce more. It would like us to produce at Q star. So how do we solve this? We once again have a per unit subsidy, which lowers the cost and shifts MPC to be in line with MSC. So it shifts them to be in line, getting us to Q star at P star as the price. Before we did that shift, we did once again have deadweight loss. That's the area in yellow here, formed by the quantity, the marginal social cost, and the marginal social / marginal private benefit. So that triangle right in there is our deadweight loss. If you have a negative production externality, this is the flip side of it. This is when you have negative benefits on third parties. So this is when you're causing harm to third parties. So here, once again, we have demand equals marginal benefit. That is both marginal private benefit and marginal social benefit. All of those are that demand curve. The supply curve here is going to be split into two different curves, one private and one social. So society wants us at Q sub 0, but the private market, which is the intersection of the private cost, the marginal private cost, and the marginal private benefit, has us producing a QE. We are producing too much. So what we need to do is a per unit or Péjovian tax, shifting MPC to be in line with marginal social cost. That then takes us back to Q sub 0 at a new price. And this would look much more close to what we're talking about with normal taxes. And if you're trying to stop production of something, this is one way you do it. And you could analyze it using all of the way that we've looked at taxes before. So you have the price paid by consumers, the price received by sellers, and the different burdens of the tax that you always had. If you need help on that, revisit my tax lecture from a while back, and that'll explain how to find all of that. So what does this correct for? This corrects for the deadweight loss that we had previously had, um, which was found by the overproduction. So that would be found by the marginal social benefit, the marginal your quantity, and the marginal social cost curve. So this area that I'm framing in here, that would be the deadweight loss before the tax. That is then eliminated because of the tax. Now, if you're thinking, but Mr. McNair, I remember when we did taxes, that's when we had deadweight loss before. Are you saying we somehow eliminated deadweight loss on one side and created it on the other? It depends how you're looking at it. If you have a marginal social cost because of a production externality, then you're actually eliminating the deadweight loss, not creating a new one. So even though you could analyze the new deadweight loss as a sort of private deadweight loss, and that would be found our traditional way of quantity, private supply, and demand, that area, that would be sort of the private deadweight loss. They've never asked about that on the AP test yet, but technically, I guess it could be something that shows up. Much more likely, though, is knowing where the deadweight loss is before the shift of the MPC to be in line with the MSC. So that is what I've already shaded in red. So that is what you should really focus on here. Now, the only other type of externality that you have to know about here is a network externality. And luckily, you don't have to graph this one. For a network externality, this exists when the value to an individual of a good or services really depends on other people using the service. So things like social media. It can be the best social media platform in the world, but if there's only 10 people on it, you're not going to get a whole lot of traction there, and it's not going to hold a lot of value. You can also think of something something like eBay. If you're going to sell your goods online and you're going to do them through an auction, the best bet is eBay. Is it because it's the best online auction platform? Not necessarily. But does it have the most visibility? Yes. So it has a much bigger network externality, and that's why you'd use it. So that's all about externalities and what they are, how to find them, how to graph them. See you in the next video.